something is always a bit difficult to know. But if you'd like to ask a question, I'd invite you to go to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen, unmute yourself, of course, and hit the waving hand, and we'll try and see you and invite you to ask your question. Perhaps I could kick things off, if I may, while you're collecting your notes together and preparing questions. A question to Andre, if you're there, Andre. I wondered about Paraides hanalei. Was that mentioned? Maybe I missed it, but this is an Amazonian species that was of some concern for a while. Is that a species that you'd like to say something about, perhaps?
Hello, hi everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Hi Dick. Much time since I saw you last time. So hanalei is a very local. Hi Felix. Nice to see you. Good to see friends here. Hanalei was in fact a very interesting species, but it's not threatened at all at the moment. Based on the few data we have, including mostly the geographical categories of evaluation, we have no basis for include this as a threatened species, but it's a very interesting and localized species, especially some subspecies are very localized and rare. But I have no more information. It's in fact a species that deserves attention for sure. But by now, considering the large amounts of forest, it's still okay in terms of conservation. Is this okay with the question?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much. I'm just looking to see whether we've got any other questions on the go. Everybody's being a bit shy at the moment. I'm sure there are going to be some coming forward in a few moments. It's a slightly unusual arrangement with one talk after another and everybody else is silent, and then suddenly you're allowed to discuss. But it's as Andre said, good to see some old friends here today. Okay, I'd like to invite James Milton to ask a question.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for your talk today. All very, very interesting. Really interesting to learn more about the swallowtail butterflies. I had just a small question for Dr. Garraway or Eric from Jamaica. Obviously, you were saying that was it Cockpit County is obviously potentially under threat from a lot of well, building works or similar too. Is there anything that that can be done from someone like myself who's in Britain internationally that could help the situation in Jamaica?
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good afternoon to all. The Cockpit Country situation is rather interesting in that it has become a really big national event. And in fact, we have just succeeded in getting the government to roll back a planned mining program. We've actually got them to back down from that program. And this was largely due to pressure both locally and internationally. So as it is now, the biggest contribution we can ask from the international supporters is whenever events like this arise, we would love to have all the voices on board, literally shouting as loud as you can, saying to the government of Jamaica and to the people of Jamaica as well, how important it is to preserve that. And in the last year or two, we saw that playing out, because the pressures that came on the Jamaican government came from various aspects, not just from the local people, but from persons like you who are willing to write, are willing to stand up and sign petitions and write articles, speaking to the international agencies who would listen, and then in turn put pressure on the Jamaican government. And that has worked in the last couple of years, and we've had quite a good success recently in having them stand down in that area that was supposed to be mined. They have stand down. So I think that's what we would ask right now. The other persons here, I think I saw Anne, other person from Jamaica who might have any other ideas?
Before we move on, Eric, if I may, I suspect one of the things James may have been getting at is that we as consumers, of course, are increasingly used to looking for sustainability evidence. Take, for example, palm oil. Now there's a lot of concern there, and people look to see whether palm oil in goods is coming from sustainable sources. The same goes for timber, sustainably managed and sourced timber. Now, in the case of things like bauxite, which of course is the mineral for aluminium, production of aluminium, we all use aluminium, but I'm not aware as to whether there is some scheme to ensure that the production of aluminium is sustainable. This is the way in which consumers in places like the UK are now making judgments as to whether to purchase product A or product B. If it's shown to be sustainable and there is clear evidence, then this puts a lot of pressure on the mining companies and therefore, of course, on the government. What do you think of that?
Thank you, Mark.
I'm not aware of any mechanism which actually measures this and actually affects the purchasing patterns, but it's something which I definitely look into. I've never really heard of any as far as aluminium production goes, but that's an interesting point which I would definitely look into.
That's good. And a lot of it, of course, is recycled these days, but perhaps that would be a line of attack. I'd like to invite Laurence Harwood now to ask his question.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thanks. Well, firstly, could I just say I'm a newcomer to the Swallowtail and Butterfly and Birdwing Butterfly Trust, but I've been fascinated by all the talks. They're all excellent, and I've really enjoyed them. I just wanted to ask Mark, how far are we away from the Great Fen project actually coming to fruition?
Oh, a lot has been achieved already, Laurence. I think in one of my slides, it's over 1,000 hectares, I think, of new fen has been created. And what's happening is the managers of the scheme are purchasing farms and farmland as it becomes available within the area that they have established as the Great Fen of the future. So a lot of land is being bought up and is being restored. So there's a lot of work being done. And in the passage of time, it will become a very important reserve indeed. At present, as I mentioned, there is no milk parsley there and there are no swallowtails. I have made a presentation to the managing group for the Great Fen project to encourage them to consider taking action for the British swallowtail, initially at first by introducing the milk parsley plants, which are easily raised in garden centres and so on. And they, as I understood, were giving this some consideration, but it's going to be a long-term thing before we can see any results. But thank you for your question.
Can I just say, it's not just Papilio macam britannicus, but I guess we'll have Lysina disbarbativus in there as well.
Well, the large copper, is that the large copper? Am I right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be good. Of course, that's been gone extinct, I think, and reintroduced to Britain once before. But you're talking about the same area of country, so there is indeed hope for that, and indeed many other species of wetland invertebrates, and plants. Peter, I'm sorry, I don't know your second name.
Sorry, Mark, it's Peter Hall.
Oh, Peter Hall, yes, I think we've met before, yes.
Yeah, you used to be my boss when we worked in Cambridge at the WCMC for
good heavens.
It's been a while.
I hope you're not going to tell any ghastly stories, are you?
No Mark Collins stories here. I want to say first, like everybody else, thank you so much for the speakers for the excellent talks. And I also wanted to say hello to a number of former colleagues like Mark and acquaintances from past expeditions and projects. I had a couple of questions specifically for Eric and Tom related to Jamaican butterflies. I hope both of you might remember my visit to Jamaica back in about 1990, where you took me up into the mountains and kindly showed me Homerus and Marcellinus both. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Lots of good photos and things. You both were saying basically that ecotourism hasn't really taken off in Jamaica in any sustainable way. And I imagine with the COVID, its situation is even much worse. First question, is there any post-COVID plans to increase ecotourism perhaps in Jamaica? And I guess the other one had to do with the state of poaching. Just how severe or how much of a problem is it still for those two particular species in Jamaica?
Eric, you want to start?
I think you have the floor, Tom, but.
Yeah, I can answer part of it, and I'll let Eric answer the bit on poaching. Sorry, no, I'll let him answer the bit on ecotourism. But as far as poaching goes, there is not really any poaching as far as Marcellinus goes, obviously because the specimen is, or the species is not common. There is a demand, but it's not a huge demand. Contrarily, Homerus, of course, has always been in tremendous demand, and there has always been a certain degree of poaching from time to time, more or less on and off. I mean, it's been pretty regular. So that's the situation. That's still going on. And of course, there are attempts to stop people and stop it happening. But it goes and comes. You hear of horrible stories where people have been there and, you know, in so many weeks have collected so many hundreds, not hundreds, so many dozen specimens. So that's as far as the poaching goes. Eric can tell you more about the ecotourism.
Eric?
Eric, we can't hear you.
We can hear you. We can hear you. I think you could speak, Eric. Oh, no. For some reason, Eric has lost his audio signal. So perhaps we'll just let Eric come back to us later on once that's sorted out. So
Muted.
No, I don't think he's not muted, actually. He's not muted. I'd like to just move on to take a question from Walde Christos. Could we have your question, please?
It's more on ecotourism.
Excellent.
Because I am involved in ecotourism. I run, I have a business partner and we run Reliable Adventures Jamaica. AKA Raj Stores, and we do bird watching, and some persons come in want to photograph butterflies, and the giant swallowtail butterfly is one that we have seen many times in the cockpit country. I want to say to you that I would love to see greater international pressure bear upon the government, for the government to make it a priority, because there are individual companies like ours who we are working hard in order to make sure that we are known internationally, and we do our own advertisement, we do our everything for ourselves, but the government hasn't been pushing ecotourism. So as a result, we are not being recognized as an ecotourism destination for soft ecotourism as we should, because of the lack of government support. So the Ministry of Tourism and the tourism, the Jamaica Tourism.
We've lost your signal, I'm afraid. It seems we've lost that signal, but basically, I hope the rest of you can hear me, if I may. I think Volde was asking for. Oh, there he is. I think we got the general point actually,
have
Voldy. So
not
let
been
me
pushing ecotourism, and we have been pounding on the door. Have you heard what I said?
Yes, it's not very good. I think we have the general message, though, Voldy, that basically you feel that there should be greater governmental support for ecotourism in Jamaica, and also you're calling for international support. I think one of the issues here is that this, of course, this would it be fair to say, this is a private sector matter. Ecotourism is an enterprise, an entrepreneurial activity, and sometimes governments of various types are not particularly keen to go overboard, certainly not financially, even though they should perhaps put in place the necessary infrastructure. Certainly in Jamaica, I had the impression from what Eric said that some parts of the country, the infrastructure is such that moving around in often very difficult terrain is one of the challenges that you have. But I think the point has been well made that ecotourism is an excellent way potentially to demonstrate value for habitats and their occupants, such as the butterflies that we're so concerned about, and that this is a valid way of pursuing conservation, and that governments, particularly national parks and other related departments, should give as much support as possible. Who's next? Damion. I'd like to invite Damion, is that Damion Whyte, to comment now. Damion, you're much involved, also in Jamaica.
Hi, good day. My name is Damion Whyte from Jamaica. I just wanted to ask a question with the first presentation you did. You mentioned that compared to other groups that the Swallowtails are not popular in terms of funding, or what I would say like compared to birds on the IUCN, like red listing and that. My question to you as a group, what will be done to try and improve on that? Because I remember noting that from your presentation that you did. That's my question.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a difficult one. Frankly, I find it rather shocking that after quite a long period of time since these early red data books were produced, there was also the invertebrate red data book, that in the Global Biodiversity Outlook published just in 2020, these points seem to be just completely ignored. Frankly, I'm a bit mystified as to why that was the case. And as I mentioned, I have written to the Convention on Biological Diversity Secretariat and to some of the suppliers of the data to ask why this is so. But I have not been given an answer. So I'm not at all sure. And it seems to me most unfortunate because it's clear that certain groups of insects, particularly the more showy ones, such as the swallowtails, have a great deal of potential to be icons and flagships for broader conservation initiatives. And we've seen this again and again, both earlier today, things like the Kinabalu birdwing, and during our recent session, species like the Schaus swallowtail, which are clearly very important icons in the very special habitats in which they survive. So all I can say to you, Damion, is, and thank you for picking up on that point, is that we have to keep up the pressure and keep reminding decision makers and so on that invertebrates, insects, and swallowtail butterflies, particularly in our interest, should be taken into account. They have a great deal to offer.
Could I add something?
Peter, yes,
that?
come back, Peter, yes.
Yes, thanks, Mark. I'm actually now a member of the IUCN Butterfly Specialist Group, and we're reconvening, and we've got more members now. And what's one of the items that we're specifically talking towards is how to raise awareness of the butterflies, and it's going to include moths in the future too, with all of the processes, including monitoring and government regulations, et cetera. So hopefully we'll be able to take on some of that question that was posed there and move it forward in the future.
That's great. I see we also have Scott Meredith with us. Scott, I don't know whether you would like to say something on this matter. I'm sure it's close to your heart. If you so wish, don't want to put you on the spot, but at some point, if you wanted to raise your hand, I would certainly like to hear from you. Pardon?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you now, Eric. Yes.
And can I go right on?
Yes, please do. Go ahead, Eric.
Back to the poaching and then on to ecotourism. We have recently had an upsurge in poaching, mainly because of the economic issues. Really, there's a lot more economic pressures on the community. And persons who would have abstained from poaching or turn a blind eye have begun to think, well, I got to survive. And that has changed the picture in that more and more, there are a couple of young men who begin to turn in that direction, which is a bit worrying trend. The ecotourism, as you said earlier, Mark, is really a private sector driven industry. And the big players really have no interest in ecotourism. Their monies are based on the sea and sun, and they put all the advertising monies into markets that bring sea and sun. It's not, very often it's not up-end market, very often is what some persons call Pepsi hamburger tourism, which is, relatively low level spending, and with absolutely no interest to get off the beach. We're famous for all-inclusive hotels. You pay your monies, you get everything. You don't even have to leave the hotel.
Yeah.
That's probably what we're most famous for. Some persons really tried, a number of small companies who try, but they make relatively very small amount of money compared to the rail tourism. Which is why I suggested we might start by taking the products to these areas. That is, we probably rear butterflies in the Rio Grande Valley and establish a butterfly house where the tourists are, and get them to visit these butterfly houses, buy souvenirs, and hopefully some members of that group who visit our butterfly houses would get enthused enough to want to leave the hotels and go and see where these butterflies really are and what they have to be doing. So it's my present idea is to come in from the back door, really, come into this sea and sun product through the back door. And that's what I'm suggesting.
That sounds excellent, Eric. I'm interested to pursue a little more this question about the private sector and its role. We heard from Richard Bennett, I think a very interesting talk. I see, Richard, you're online. And it was very interesting to me to see how captive breeding, which is a fairly commonplace management tool in conservation on a small scale, but led by people like yourself in the private sector, the captive breeding idea is actually getting more deeply researched and is being extended through sociological thinking and involving local farmers who can benefit. Now, in the case if what you've been doing in Kenya for the export market to the US and Europe could be copied in Jamaica, I can't see any reason why local farmers should not be providing the material for a local butterfly farm or butterfly house near the tourist hotspots up on the north coast there. This would seem to be bringing things very well together. You'd get conservation of the butterflies, a better economy for the farmers in the region, and the tourists would be happy as well. So I think it's very interesting to bring together the sort of presentations we've seen today and see how the private sector and the academic and research sectors could easily be learning from each other. Anyway, that's just a thought from me. Who else have we got, Martin? Richard, did you want to add anything to that little diatribe from me?
No, it sounds, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay. Nice to see you.
I'm in the wilds of Amboseli at the moment. There's elephant in the background, there's hyenas over there, so got to keep my voice down. But basically, I think a very good idea to try and do something like that in Jamaica. You do not need necessarily to breed the rarities to make them interesting. You've got plenty of interesting swallowtails and other butterflies over there, would be easy to breed, and a good flight area could be set up. And of course, that is the thing that starts bringing your local farmers in and gets donations from tourists that are visiting, etc., etc. Good idea.
Thank you. It's good to see you, Richard, and happy memories of Amboseli, one of the world's most beautiful places. I'd like to just put a question, a little pebble in the pond, if I may, that has come to me, and I'd like to invite views and opinions from the floor. When a butterfly is extremely rare, as some of the ones, for example, in Brazil that we've heard about are, and indeed in Jamaica and other places, is it best to keep the locations secret in order to avoid the sort of over collecting that we've heard can sometimes occur? Or is it better to make them known, advertise them with information boards, get local people involved, inform local people, so that in practice, local people recognize that they have a valuable resource and they protect it because it's of interest to them, and that this could be more effective than keeping these things secret, which has tended to happen in the past. Does anybody like to comment on this?
I'll comment, Richard here. Yeah, I mean, all depends on the biology of the butterfly. Some of them are occurring in very, very small areas. They could, in theory, be done a lot of damage by some hard-nosed collectors that go into a place like that. A load of other butterflies, like your canopy dwellers, very difficult to get anywhere near those. Habitat destruction is the main problem there, I would say. So it depends on the species.
Thank you, Richard. James, you wanted to have the floor.
Hello, yeah, thank you, Mark. I mean, I am only an undergraduate student, but in regard to what I was just thinking, I think it's actually similar to Richard, actually, that I think it depends how rare the butterfly is. So obviously, if there are only very, very limited breeding sites, then obviously it seems maybe a little reckless to say, oh look, they're all here, the last breeding site of this butterfly. But obviously, if there are a number of breeding sites, potentially you could do it to a certain, maybe, you know, one breeding site and then leave a few others that you know that are kind of secret. I don't know, but that was just a thought I had anyway.
Thank you, James. I wonder if Simona, you might have something to say about this. The question of whether to, because you in your quarries you had the information boards and so on and so forth, but over collecting with Papilio alexinor has been a problem in the past. What is your feeling now about this matter? Is it better to tell everybody about it or keep it secret?
At least, good evening to everybody.
Good evening, lovely to see you.
In Italy, the second approach was successfully, so to bring all the people known about the location was more successful than keep secret. Consider that in Italy we have a very huge biodiversity, but not so many rangers or regulation to avoid collection. So often in the past, and also now, we have a lot of people that come from everywhere in our Alps, in our very nice places, and do holidays collecting butterflies. So for Italy, it's a very huge problem, not only for Papilio alexandra, also for other rare species in the Alps as well as in the south part of Italy. So to make people known about the presence of a rare species was a very good solution. It's not the solution, but it's a part of a solution, at least.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Jaret Daniels, you're still there, I hope. I can see you. I just wonder, you, with Schaus swallowtail, it was striking how the population crashed and you took it sort of under your wing, so to speak, started breeding it up and now releasing it by the hundreds. Seeing what's being done again in Kenya, I wonder, would there be any potential for getting local people in Florida to take an interest and perhaps to breed this butterfly? I know that there are Facebook groups who, largely in the United States, who do exchange a lot of information about breeding butterflies in their backyards. Is this something that might have potential for Schaus swallowtail?
I don't think so for this butterfly, unfortunately, because of the constraints of the Endangered Species Act within the US, but the public involvement has been very important to the conservation of that butterfly and others. And so we rely a lot on community scientists in the field, and many of the groups in Florida have also actually taken action with petitioning the federal and state governments for listing species as well, both here in Florida and elsewhere. So that public involvement is really, really critical. And we have a very active butterfly watching community within the US as well. So that does drive tourism to local areas. It does certainly enhance and even police areas. We've seen in incidents of some sites with local, really rare taxa that the public is actually taking it upon their shoulders to police those areas for bad actors, if you will, that might want to trample habitat or potentially even poach species.
Thank you, Darren. Jaret, I'd just like to raise another matter about sort of community involvement, which is basically what we're talking about here, and bring up the phrase citizen science. This was mentioned, forgive me, I can't remember quite which speaker it was, talking about citizen science. I'd be very interested to hear from anybody in the audience who has positive or possibly negative experience of how citizen science can be used to help in the conservation of these butterflies. Anybody have something to say on that subject? Yeah, Peter, you're there.
Yes, thanks, Mark. I guess with the advent of all of the new social networking opportunities, one of them involves butterfly observation. We've got all of those new sites like iNaturalist and eButterfly, and there's thousands and thousands of people going out there, not collecting, but photographing and submitting their observations. And they're building into the millions and millions now. That's happening globally. Surely a number of countries might benefit from trying to make it more aware of where the best butterflying sites might be in some of these countries to attract these kind of people in.
Very interesting. I've got a couple of people. Laurence, could I take you next? And then I'll take you, Eric. Laurence first.
Thank you. I'll make a plug for butterfly conservation in the UK. I'm a board trustee of that, and we have the big butterfly count every year, and there's an app you can download to your phone, and you can just check butterflies in the garden. And we had 300,000 submissions last year, and public awareness is vital in any country about these things. And if people don't see butterflies, they don't care about them. And the big butterfly count has been fantastic, and we now have the big city butterfly project. So public engagement is critical to everything.
Thank you very much. Eric.
In case of the Homer swallowtail, there's already so much information out there, it's hard to hide it at this time. So we depend to a great extent on the communities to actually protect the species. And without the community, we could not have possibly got as far as we have in terms of even the basic research work. So the citizens in the Blue and Jonker Mountains, and to some extent in the Cockpit country, were really integral and indispensable in actually getting us to this point, just in terms of basic biology, ecology, etc., just basic research work. And there's a little experience which I share, which is one of my favorites. I arrived in one of these communities some years ago, got my nets out, and two little girls walked out of a stream, and they sort of blocked my pathway and threatened to call the police because I had arrived to collect the butterfly. Basically, these two kids had gotten the message from their parents and were willing to apprehend me. A great big old man like me. And the community message had worked. So I would think without the involvement of the community, we could not possibly do the research work, and we could not possibly protect it.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric. I'd like to raise one more question and invite any comment. We've just got a few minutes left, and that's about legislation, aimed at protecting swallowtails, birdwings, and indeed other butterflies and insects. It's interesting to hear what Jaret said, that implying that the fact that something is protected in law makes it difficult in some ways for people to assist. And the same goes actually for the British swallowtail, which is a protected species. And you can't just go off and start doing something, but you have to have a license from Natural England in order to do so. And at a different scale, we have the CITES legislation, of course, which is to do with international trade in endangered species and lists all the birdwings and now a number of other species, including Parnell birchellanus, which I noted at one point was selling on the open market for quite significant sums of money. But do these listings on endangered species legislation or at the international scale in CITES, for example, are these effective ways to enhance conservation of swallowtails and birdwings? I'd like to invite any thoughts on that. Maybe from people who haven't spoken yet. I'm sure you have experience of this. Andre, you have the floor.
Just a comment, I'll be quick. I think in Brazil, for example, the major problem is the habitat that are vanishing, not collecting. But as you mentioned, when we can find lots of Brazilian threatened butterflies in websites to be sold in Japan, Europe, and United States, there's no legislation that will be enough to stop with this. So I think a word moratorium of selling and buying these species would be the first step. Independent if they were collected in last century or not, it should be forbidden. But of course, this is not the only way and the most important action to stop, at least for the Brazilian species, where collecting is not that important in extincting and vanishing populations.
Thank you. Any other views on the effectiveness of CITES and other legislation? Richard, I expect you've come across this a little in your career. Do you have any thoughts?
I think there's a lot of species on the list that really don't deserve to be on the list. I've noticed that over in Indonesia, for instance, where some of the commonest butterflies you will see are some of the birdwing butterflies.
Indeed, and very often we're often told that the legislation prevents research going on. I mean, some of the species mentioned by Martin Partridge this morning that are very endangered on certain Indonesian islands, it's extremely difficult to establish a research project to go and find out what's the problem and to do more. Andrea, I see you have your hand up. Andrea Baruzzi.
Yeah, thank you for the chance. I worked with Simona Bonelli on the field researching on Papilio lexanor, and Papilio lexanor is listed on Annex 4 of the Habitat Directive of the European Community. I think the problem is not being listed on CITES or Annex 4, but to have the people, the rangers, forestal policy, and so on, to contrast the poachers. Simona told really well that the choice of publishing data on Papilio lexanor on the depleted quarry was successful because it concentrates all the interest of the poachers in one places and leave the other colonies, and there are many, many more around the quarries and kilometers away from the quarries, that they are still untouched by people because no one knows that they are there. So basically, there are two factors that have to work together. You have to make right legislation, but also you have to get the resource to have the law enforced. If you leave only people without law or law without the people to manage, I think you cannot go anywhere.
Andre, did you want to come back on this one?
Yeah, it's just a comment. Legislation is not the solution. Actions are more important. For example, this week I saw a very big website in the United States that's selling IP wood and saying that is environmentally friendly. It's impossible. That not exists. So while people are buying any kind of wood from the tropical forests, the problem is not be solved. While people are buying for endangered insects, the problem is not be solved. So legislation is not enough. We need to change the mentality of people. Okay, that's my point of view. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that makes sense.
I'm sure it's not wrong, and I think with that, I'll try and draw the meeting to a close, if I may. We're just past the time frame that we promised you all. So I think we've had I'm sure we all agree, it's been a fascinating conference. We've heard some really excellent presentations with so many aspects to them, many of which we haven't been fully able to explore during the questions and answers. But one thing is clear, that there is a huge enthusiasm and growing enthusiasm for conservation of these beautiful butterflies around the planet. And there's a lot of experience and growing experience that can be exchanged between people to enable us to achieve more. Many challenges remain, of course, there's no question about that. But the information base is reasonably strong, actually, and I think there's grounds for criticism that the information base that we have is not being adequately used. A point that was picked up by James, by some of the authorities who really ought to be doing more to pay attention to some other groups of species rather than the usual suspects. We've also had some very useful discussions, I think, about the role of legislation, the potential for communities to get involved and to help us do research through citizen science, and the need for training. I like the point about rangers, for example, where there has been training of national parks rangers, certainly in parts of Africa in particular, for many decades. But rangers in national parks around the world are not often really inducted much into the biology and ecology of butterflies. And this is something that certainly in SBBT we'd like to see more done on that. We haven't managed to find a way as yet. But I think with just those few points, which I'm sure are completely inadequate to describe what we've been discussing today, I'd like to thank you all very much indeed, particularly, of course, the speakers who've put together these marvelous presentations, but also, excuse me, the marvelous audience that have taken part and given up their time today to join us online. I hope one of these days we'll be able to meet face to face, but meanwhile, do continue to support what we're doing in the Swallowtail and Birdwing Butterfly Trust, and we hope to see you again before too long. So with that, have a good day, have a good evening, whatever time of day it is with you. And thank you for joining in. So it's goodbye from us.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ciao Martin, ciao Evrim.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye, everybody.
Yes.
Bye, Felix. Nice to see you. Bye, Van Rij. Dick, nice to see you. I hope you can meet soon.
Bye-bye, everybody.